So let me quickly return. This is meeting number 4 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security. Welcome. We are working on the Canada-United States Border Management Study. We're in hybrid. We have 2 witnesses video conferencing today, so I am speaking to them at present. For our guests, please wait until I call on you by name. And if you're participating via microphone, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. Otherwise, please mute yourself when you're not speaking. With regard to interpretation now, our wonderful interpreters, we thank them for their service. We thank them for their presence here this morning. There is a considerable appreciation for their work from members of this committee. It's really lovely to have you right here with us, and we thank you for your work. As for interpretation, then, for those who are on the Zoom application, you can choose between English, French, and the floor, and of course in the room you know how to do the same. You can use the earpiece and choose the channel of your choice. So I would like to welcome our 2 witnesses of the first hour. The first is Dr. Tim Nohara, President and Chief Executive Officer of Accipitur Radar Technologies Incorporated. And our second witness, Mr. Samuel Cooper from the Bureau. Both are speaking to us via video conference. So welcome. Welcome. Let's begin with Dr. Nohara. You have 5 minutes, sir, for your opening statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for inviting me to appear before you to provide witness testimony for your study of Canada-United States border management. There's a rich history of Canada and the United States working together to secure our land and maritime borders that goes back to 9/11 over 20 years ago. The 2,000-kilometer long maritime border that runs through the middle of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway in Ontario and Quebec is the biggest threat for human trafficking and contraband smuggling, including the guns and the drugs which are on our streets. And the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway border is the most challenging to secure because you can't simply assign more border guards to patrol that border in the middle of those big lakes and rivers. You need radar technology and the ability to assess the shore-to-shore behavior of the thousands of small pleasure craft in the warmer months and the vehicles on the ice in the coldest months where parts freeze over. The far majority of those vessels and vehicles are law-abiding folks, of course, enjoying our beautiful outdoors. But those with suspicious behavior are the ones we're after. So for over a decade, between 2004 to 2016, Accipitur Radar worked with the RCMP, DRDC, Canada Coast Guard, CBSA, Transport Canada, on the US CBP, US Coast Guard, and DHS, and various other federal, provincial, state, and local law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border. And we developed the technologies and the methodologies needed, and we conducted multi-year operational deployments in several representative hotspots of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway. And we proved that we could affordably secure that border. The radars we deployed at those hotspots are still operational today. As a key Canadian industry player, I have been a direct participant in the pioneering work I just described, which is why I accepted your invitation to come before you. One of the key lessons that we learned together is that you need persistent radar surveillance across the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway to secure that border. I would note that we began in 2004 using a portable surveillance trailer, not a persistent system, for surge operations at particular locations to monitor and learn what we didn't know about the smuggling behaviors. And the surveillance data we collected and mined and the arrests that we made on both sides of the border quickly showed us that these early successes were the tip of the iceberg. These lessons learned led to the announcement of RCMP's BITEP project, the Border Integrity Technology Enhancement Project, under former Commissioner Mike Cabana and Assistant Commissioner Joe Oliver, who headed technical operations at the time. Their persistent surveillance network was budgeted in 2014 and was supposed to be operational in 2017-18. For its part, the United States has continued to expand its persistent radar surveillance capabilities, which is clearly more difficult if Canada is not expanding on our side of the border in order to fully capture the shore-to-shore suspicious activity. Accipiter continues to provide persistent radar as a service to U.S. Border Patrol. And America is reminding us today that they value us doing our part. From my perspective, it appears that Canada is once again starting with the idea of using a portable surveillance trailer like we did back in 2004, along with some helicopters. While useful for sure, unfortunately, these will do very little to secure the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway border. Accipiter is able to turn on persistent radar surveillance in certain areas in a matter of a week, leveraging those radar sites we had previously deployed, which would allow Canada to immediately start building the complete border activity picture with the United States. And we can expand that radar as a service capability in less than 2 years to cover all key areas of concern where vessels, low-flying aircraft, and drones are involved in smuggling. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Nohara. Mr. Cooper?
Thank you for inviting a journalist to address lawmakers on a subject of extraordinary national importance. Tens of thousands of lives, our livelihoods, and our sovereignty are at stake. I offer my remarks and recommendations with humility. I'm still learning every day. I speak regularly with numerous law enforcement and security professionals in both the United States and Canada. For over a decade, I've focused professionally on the threats that transnational crime poses to Canada's borders, institutions, and people, alongside deep reporting on our financial and legal vulnerabilities to threat networks that often include ties to hostile state activity. Canada's recent terror designation of the India-based Bishnoi gang is important, but that particular action recognizes just one facet of many-sided transnational fentanyl, human trafficking, Chinese-supplied chemical precursor, weapons trafficking, terror, and extremism threats I'll discuss today. Across hundreds of interviews with Canadian and US experts, I've come to a conclusion. Many Canadians, including citizens, lawmakers, and judges, don't yet fully understand the scope and nature of the problem and also seem defensive in engaging it. And if we don't understand it, we can't solve it. So in these politically divisive times, I hope I can add some value by relaying clearly and fairly what professionals on both sides of the border are saying about the cultural, legal, and political differences that have impeded cooperation between the United States and Canada. My reporting has emphasized Canadian enforcement challenges not to be unduly critical of my homeland, but because I think we should focus first on the levers we control here in Canada and reforms we should have already tackled decades ago. And this isn't my opinion only. As you know, Canadian Association Police Chiefs President Thomas Carrick recently warned that police are being asked to confront a new wave of lethal transnational threats with, quote, outdated and inadequate laws never designed to address today's criminal landscape. He added Canada would have been far better positioned to disrupt organized crime had Ottawa acted on reforms first recommended in the early 2000s. RCMP Assistant Commissioner David Teboul said this year, after the discovery of major fentanyl labs in British Columbia, notable for their commercial-grade chemistry and scientific expertise, quote, there's a need for legislative reform around how such equipment and precursor chemicals can be obtained, end quote, in Canada. So more border regulations and technology could and will help, but they won't be sufficient absent foundational legal change. It's long been my experience in discussions with senior US enforcement experts that American and Australian police can collaborate effectively because the two nations are able to authorize wiretaps on dangerous and well-known transnational suspects in each of those countries within days and in cooperative ways. In Canada, that speed is impossible. as former RCMP investigator Calvin Krusty testified before British Columbia's Cullen Commission several years ago, due to judicial blockages arising from Charter of Rights rulings, it had become practically impossible to obtain timely wiretaps on Sinaloa cartel targets residing in Vancouver. In recent years, such delays in sensitive investigations have undermined cooperation between the RCMP and the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration in major cases of fentanyl traffic and money laundering. In 2017, I was personally alerted to these longstanding concerns about the breakdown in RCMP DEA cooperation by a U.S. State Department official who had reached out to me when I was in Vancouver. These impeded investigations involve the upper echelons of Chinese triads, which maintain deep global leadership in Canada and align with Chinese state interference networks, as well as senior Iranian and Hezbollah-linked networks operating here in Canada. Both networks are engaged in fentanyl trafficking and money laundering in collaboration with Mexican cartels active in Canada. So my first recommendation is this: there is no low-hanging fruit. I've not spoken to a single knowledgeable Canadian officer, current or former, who believes that simply spending more on personal, equipment, training, or border staffing will solve this. What I hear is that from 10 to 20 years ago, before the evolution of charter-driven disclosure and delay jurisprudence rulings in Canada, our nations enjoyed a much closer enforcement relationship. Experts point above all to two Supreme Court rulings, Stinchcombe and Jordan, as the core legal obstacles. Very simply, our Stinchcombe disclosure standards and Jordan
Mr. Cooper, another 10 or 15 seconds.
Okay, disincentivize complex multi-jurisdictional cases and deter U.S. partners from cooperating with Canada. Thank you very much, Chairman and members.
Thank you to you, Mr. Cooper and Dr. Noara, which enables us to turn first to MP Caputo, and then I'll turn to MP Akan for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much to both of our witnesses here. I'm going to start here with Mr. Cooper. You've written extensively on fentanyl, and I appreciate what you've written. Can I ask, sir, what is the biggest hurdle to addressing what is appears to me as to be a fentanyl production crisis in Canada?
The biggest hurdle at this point, as I indicated, is a lack of cooperation between U.S. and Canadian law enforcement, and that stems from what has evolved over the past 10 years. As I said in my opening remarks, the Charter of Rights is a foundational, amazing piece and set of rules to protect honest, lawful, nonviolent Canadians. And we all appreciate that. But it has become, as I've said many times in my professional work, a shield for transnational organized crime consistent of the most dangerous threat networks in the world. That is precursor suppliers from China, Chinese threat networks laundering money at scale through Canadian banks and Canadian cities. And these are networks that are and typologies well explained by the U.S. Treasury. I say the U.S. Treasury has discovered some $300 billion in cartel fentanyl money laundering through these Chinese money laundering networks in the United States. I say these networks are disproportionately active in Canada.
Pardon, monsieur. Sorry, Mr. Cooper. I just wanted to check. Ça va, Madame Bellefeuille? Okay, so interpretation has stopped, so we'll suspend for a few seconds just to make sure that it's working again. Interpretation is back. Sorry for the slight interruption, and also mentioning that the interpreters are just amazing, but they sometimes struggle when the flow of the speech is too quick. So let's try to find the right equilibrium between the density and the speed at which you are speaking. So thank you. Back to you, Mr. Cooper.
I'm sorry. I can perhaps I can zero in on my question a little bit more, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cooper, my impression is that the Americans have a great deal of intelligence when it comes to drug trafficking. Is our government acting when we receive that intelligence?
Thank you, member. That's the core of the problem. Our government and our police agencies have great will to tackle these transnational fentanyl and, by the way, methamphetamine, ecstasy, ketamine networks that are using Chinese precursors and producing predominantly in Western Canada in labs. The Americans have even greater intelligence, I believe, on the international networks supplying. But the holdup here and the challenge is that due to mainly, as I say, the Stinchcombe law, it necessitates that our Crown prosecutors disclose almost all or all of the investigation evidence when the RCMP or other agencies try to tackle one of these fentanyl network in labs. They will be asked to disclose particularly sensitive and potentially national security damaging secrets. And so that is a real bar between cooperation between, for one, Canadian-based intelligence and law enforcement. We know the evidence to intelligence disclosure challenges. They're very well heard in Parliament and other fora. And of course, it's even greater between our Five Eyes partners with intelligence and investigative leads sharing, or the RCMP sharing back to the Americans. And that has caused major problems, including in the Falkland so-called super lab case.
Thank you, sir. So I'm just looking at one of your documents here, February 8th, 2025, and you write extensively. I think you're one of the foremost experts on border security and international and foreign interference. And I'm just going to quote you here. Veteran law enforcement officials, both active and retired from the United States of Canada, have come forward with explosive allegations suggesting that Canada's federal government may have systematically obstructed investigations into the highest levels of Asian organized crime, end quote. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, that's reported with great gravity. The people that came forward were pointing specifically to cases such as Cameron Ortis, the former RCMP intelligence director, who was convicted for sharing Five Eyes international enforcement plans with the very networks that this hearing should be concerned of. This is Mr. Ortis allegedly or convicted for sharing plans with Sinaloa cartel connected, Hezbollah connected, Chinese money laundering connected threat networks in Vancouver in one case. In Toronto, Mr. Ortis allegedly reaching out to the highest levels of Iranian connected transnational money laundering, inclusive of Iranian Canadian currency traders in Canada, allegedly working with Pakistani threat networks. And so that is one case where the sources I talked to said they were afraid corruption had damaged, perhaps irreparably, our relations with America and others.
I see. Okay. I have about 45 seconds here. You talk about corruption. Is that corruption occurring on Canadian soil? And if so, where?
The corruption has occurred within the CBSA, according to sourcing. As I said, it has occurred on Canadian soil within the RCMP, where these threat networks we're talking about have, as Mr. Ortis said in court, exquisite visibility on RCMP investigation plans. I'll end by saying some sources were very distressed that our former Prime Minister was, as the Globe and Mail reported, stumbled into a surveillance operation that was targeting senior Chinese threat networks in British Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Now to MP Akan, et après on va passer à la députée de Bellefeuille.
After which we'll hear from Ms. Belfay.
And I would like to welcome our guests today, the witnesses today, Mr. Cooper and Dr. Nohara. Thank you very much for appearing before the committee. I'm a member of Parliament for Oakville West, who has an electronics engineering background, so experience in automation, autonomous tech, and robotics. So tech has always been my interest area. So my questions are going to be in that field. Welcome again, Dr. Nohara. As you briefly gave an overview on your opening remarks, could you please provide details on the types of radar technologies that your company has implemented along the Canadian border, particularly in collaboration with the CBSA or port authorities? And I'm interested in understanding the scope, capabilities, and the operational impact of these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. A good example, maybe the best example, is in the Windsor-Detroit corridor, where the Windsor Port Authority and their harbor master, Peter Berry, VP, has been a key part of that 2004 to 2015-16 effort I spoke about. So we have deployed multiple radars on both sides of the border in a small corridor there in the major shipping channel. There's also multiple cameras deployed, and the radars and cameras and other sensors, drone detection sensors, all work together. So there's a lot of pleasure craft that far outnumber, these are the small vessels that far outnumber the vessels, the ships that the authorities know about. They don't know about the pleasure craft without radar. It's the only technology that can see the small pleasure craft. And so we see that. I provided you with some visuals. And so we deploy a subset of sensors on both sides. We make all kinds of radar technologies. If you want to get into the specifics, I can speak to that. But the important part is those radars are surveying 24/7, 365, and in real time we're mining that data, that cross-border activity, where a vessel starts from, does it meet up with another vessel? When it crosses the border, we generate an alert. Where does it end up? So we're mining that data so that we can deliver different decision support to the different stakeholders that are involved in protecting those waterways. They're not only involved in the border protection, the border security. A harbor master's primary job is the safe movement of vessels through that major shipping corridor. So there's safety and security elements that the data serves by delivering different types of information derived from the core radar data and controlling other sensors automatically so you can get visual identification. You know what you're looking at more specifically. Radar itself is non-identifying, so it presents a track, if you will, a trajectory on the screen, but you don't know exactly what it is you're looking at. We automatically grab camera control. If necessary, if it's a high-profile, suspicious activity, automatically put the camera, the eyes on the target to get additional information back to the operators.
Thank you for your answer. So speaking of Port of Windsor, could you please tell us any notable success or operational outcomes? And as a follow-up question, how could these radar technologies be further leveraged to strengthen our borders, the border surveillance capabilities more broadly across Canada?
Sure, thank you. So we've seen everything. From a border security perspective, I've personally been involved over that period of time with the various actors, the agencies that work very tightly together on both sides of the border, and there have been arrests, and those arrests have dealt with guns, contraband, money, drugs. There's human trafficking, so we've provided information and intelligence from those persistent radar networks to support that. So there's search and rescue, there's situations where vessels get in distress. Not only do we provide better eyes for our emergency response teams to save lives, but we also provide the investigative data. It's persistent because everything that's seen by the system is kept in mind forever, and it's very, very flexible how you can go after it. Two, we've proven the technology. We've together developed the capabilities. Operationally, this is a key piece. Operationally, multi-year operations with all of the agencies on both sides of the border working together. I don't want to put numbers here. This is a public forum, but let's say if you don't have the methodologies, you have some response vessels, and somebody crosses the border, maybe at night, you've got a track, you try and intercept. That's a difficult problem to get two vessels intercepting each other. Without the technology, we have learned we couldn't secure the border fully. With the technology, many hundreds of percents of improvement in operational efficiency, meaning we take the assets that we have, the vehicles on the road, the vessels on the water, now aircraft in the air, and we can dispatch those and give those operators tools so they can be more effective with those assets securing the border. And for broader expansion, it's just a question of moving the intent as the RCMP, as I noted in that opening with the BITEP project from the RCMP, the intent was to pilot over multi-year, develop
10 seconds, Dr. Nohara.
Thank you. And then roll it out across that 2,000-kilometer undefended Great Lakes maritime border. So that's really the next step if we want to secure that border, is to just roll it out. And it's very easy. It's 10 to 20% the cost of the Gordie Howe Bridge.
Thank you, Dr. Nohara. Madame de Bellefeuille, et ensuite MPA.
Ms. Bellefeuille, to be followed by MPA. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am just checking to ensure that the interpretation is working correctly. Can you hear me, Mr. Nohara? Can you hear me in English? Yes?
Mieux vérifier avant parce que
Good. I just wanted to check because sometimes I launch into something and the French hasn't yet been connected for the person listening to me. Look, I'm a member. I represent a riding in the south section of Quebec along the border with New York and Ontario and the Akwesasne Indian Reserve. So Lac Saint-François, St. Francis Lake, is a maritime zone. There's a good deal of weapons smuggling as well as human smuggling. We had immigrants attempting to cross, at least become immigrants, who actually died as they were trying to get across that area where there's a good deal of illegal weapons coming in from the United States onto Canadian territory. And the feeling we get from elected officials in that area is that no one is really convinced that security is being ensured or that there are sufficient efforts to intercept the contraband and so on, that people aren't necessarily making sufficient efforts. Could you tell us that whether your radar surveillance approach could help us in that area, in the St. Lawrence Seaway as well, whether it would be helpful for us to follow what's going on and intercept more criminals?
Question. The absolute clear answer, yes. The persistent radar surveillance networks I'm speaking to started in 2004 in that very area you're speaking to. I personally was involved in several operations with my team, so I've personally witnessed the areas, and that's where our first discoveries were on the value of persistent surveillance. We continue to support the members in that area, but in that area, that's a clear case of missing technology. They need the technology. It was supposed to happen. The BITEP project, which I referred to first and foremost, was to cover the region from the mouth of the northeastern side of Lake Ontario up through the St. Lawrence Seaway to Lake St. Francis. So the problem persists and continued. You've cited some recent and unfortunate public incidents, but the answer is very straightforward. It's persistent surveillance.
Merci. Alors, ce que je comprends, Monsieur Nohara, c'est parce que là, j'ai la traduction.
I understand from that, to Dr. Nohara, that What I understand, Dr. Nohara, is that the technology has been tried in that area of Quebec, Ontario, and the United States on the Lake and Seaway. So is the pilot project over? And if it is, I suppose the government has withdrawn the technology and kind of abandoned our area of the country, which is so important for weapons smuggling, the sort of firearms that can be used by people perpetrating serious crimes and the sort of tragedies we've seen in Quebec. So could you tell me why it's no longer being used?
Yes, and thank you for the question. I'll answer the last question, why it's not being used second, if that's okay. And the first point you alluded to was the technology abandoned? So I will point out in my earlier remarks, I mentioned that we did testing in hotspots and that surveillance technology still exists as radar as a service. It still exists in some of the very areas you're referring to. So in a matter of a week, we could make a difference in certain key areas that you're referring to right now. The expansion would be beyond that. Why it got dropped on the Canadian side? Again, that project, the BITEP project, was federally was approved in the federal budget in 2014, and it was supposed to be complete in 2017-18. I don't know the answer on the inside as to why that happened. I can only conclude that priorities changed somewhere.
Alors, il me reste un
So I have a little time left, Dr. Nohara. Let's look into that in greater depth. So the budget was not reallotted as of 2017, you say. Do you think that CBSA was unhappy with your technology, or perhaps the RCMP thought it was insufficient? Has anything come in to replace it that's equivalent? Or, you know, the budget's held and people just drop the technology?
Great question. First of all, it's RCMP led between the ports of entry. So RCMP is the primary border integrity responsible party there. No, they love the technology. The technology's not a concern. We continue to have relationships with them. It's a question of the small amount of money, to be honest, and you know why it didn't come back. I sort of can't personally answer that question, but I can tell you one of the challenges is that it's now been over 10 years, say, you know, since the persistent surveillance was used in that area on the Canadian side.
Dr. Nohara, another 10 seconds, please.
So, so there needs to be a refresh, I guess I would say, to bring attention back to what we proved together from 2004 to 2015-16.
Thank you so much. We'll now turn to MP Howe, ensuite le député d'Endurant.
And then MP d'Endurant.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper, for coming and share your information with us. So you mentioned about corruption in the system. So may I ask you to elaborate further on this, such as who, where, how, what's the scale, and what has been done to address it or not?
Thank you for your question. The most serious known case involved Cameron Ortis, the head of RCMP intelligence, and it can't be understated how damaging it was simply because of the level of knowledge that he had from the highest levels of our allies' intelligence in the Five Eyes. That includes the NSA, CIA, of course, Australia. And he, what we heard in court, for personal reasons, shared the intelligence plans from Washington and Canberra with the very networks involved in encryption technology using Vancouver's capacity, its infrastructure, to move drugs around the world, money launder, to command murders. So you can't underestimate how much that angered our allies. It goes further, as Mr. Ortis himself said in court. he pointed to what he said other senior levels of corruption in the RCMP in relation to, again, these transnational threat networks. And it hasn't been, widely reported, but an element of his charges could not even be heard in our courts due to national security rulings from the judge. The allegations were that Mr. Ortis was on the brink of sharing intelligence with the Chinese embassy in Ottawa. I gathered in relation to an ongoing intelligence investigation into Chinese threat networks in Canada. This was around 2019. So that case in itself, from known documents, gives us some idea of the scale and how troublesome or how damaging to our allies that case was, and that it goes further.
So, Mr. Cooper, so how about cases that we don't know about? What corruption that's going on that we are still not have information?
Some of my reporting has covered complaints from U.S. government sources that say that they are no longer comfortable sharing sensitive intelligence on international investigations that are relevant to Canada with their Canadian partners because they have encountered known cases where they warned the RCMP that they believed people attending sensitive meetings from the Canadian side were involved in corruption. And yet, as I was told and reported, those meetings proceeded. So this gave the Americans the message that Canada wasn't taking Washington's concerns of corruption within Canada's most sensitive investigative arm seriously. And I've further been told that senior U.S. drug enforcement investigators are alarmed by what they see as RCMP's casual acceptance of corruption within its ranks. And this speaks directly to the matters we're examining today.
So further to my question, now, how deep and how widespread is the corruption? And, are there any ministers involved?
What I can tell you is that I've been told by both Canadian, even politicians, including Mayor Brad West, had informed me that he had learned from U.S. government sources that trusted him, that they were concerned that some Canadian politicians were much too close, perceived to be too close, and meeting with people involved in suspected Chinese threat networks. So the concerns from a Canadian politician have been relayed to me, the concerns from Canadian police and U.S. police and intelligence that there is a concern that foreign threat networks surround Canadian politicians.
And how about the RCMP corruption?
I answered this with a feeling of great gravity, but the Cameron Ortis case in itself, a convicted highest level RCMP intelligence official, that damaged, as I say, in ways we don't yet understand, our relations with allies. And I have heard from U.S. enforcement sources that followed that case, they weren't even sure that Mr. Ortis would be convicted. They weren't confident that Canada's court system could handle a prosecution. And Mr. Ortis himself in that case pointed to other high-level sources of suspected corruption within the RCMP. So I think that speaks to a deep, high, and broad concern. And
another 10 seconds, Mr. Cooper. Good. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, but that was over the 5 minutes. So let's turn to député Dandurand et ensuite le député Lloyd.
MP Dandurand to be followed by MP Lloyd. 5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I'm from a border area as well.
Qui traverse.
We have one lake over the border in the Stansted region in the eastern townships in Quebec. And my border is made up mostly of forested areas. Mr. Nohara, Dr. Nohara, I am interested in the ability to set this radar surveillance system up in areas that are forested. What could it be used for in my area?
Excellent question. Thank you. So there are different types of radar, or at least radar processing for different targets of interest is the language we use. So we're tracking vessels on the water versus drones or aircraft in the air versus persons walking out of a forest, say, onto an open road or field. I'm familiar with a lot of those areas, and certainly drones are an important new concern, and we have good drone detection capability to be able to see drones, fly out of those areas or above those areas carrying contraband. Persons, there's all kinds of everything from cameras to sensors underground that can actually see and track people coming out of forested areas. And that technology has been well developed. It was included and originally part of that BITEP program that I referred to. So it's a combination of radar, counter-drone, drone detection sensors, and then human detection sensors, which typically are what we call radio frequency-based or camera-based technologies. Readily available.
Merci. Et puis,
Thank you. What are the dead zones, the invisible zones that still exist? Of course, a good deal of technology is now being used, but what is on the horizon? What should we be looking for in the future? What new technology would improve border safety and security? When securing the border, we know that this border is not generally secured, not surveillance along the entirety of it. It's being such a long shared border. So what are we looking for in the future?
Hopefully, first and foremost, an expansion of the proven technologies that we have, because they cover, a tiny fraction of 1% of the border. So that's the first piece, is just expansion of what we already know. We've spent 15 years developing and understanding how to do this. There are continuous innovations going on in terms of technology. I would say the biggest area, I don't want to use the word AI. We helped invent it in the 80s, but everybody uses that word, so you're familiar with it. Let me say, the automated mining, the better mining of data, so that we can see, we can pull the suspicious activity out of the background, which is normal, good folks, carrying out what they're doing. So better post-processing, I'll use that word generically, and there's lots of investment and capabilities coming there. And then it's really information sharing and interoperability. So it's not so much the technology as, in fact, the other witness is speaking to, the inability to share information among trusted partners. It's exactly the same thing. When you secure a border, you have partners on the U.S. side, partners on the Canadian side, at the federal level, the provincial, state level, the local level. And so it's taking that sensor data, one sensor, and sharing that information in an appropriate way in real time, or in analytical historical intelligence to respective users.
merci beaucoup, Monsieur Cooper.
Thank you very much. For you, Mr. Cooper, in your prior answers, I heard a lot. I heard you say that there's a good deal of hearsay, at least, around the sorts of things that you told us about. But could you tell us about your experience and your competency, your skills, and experience related to the Canada-U.S. border, given that you started by saying that you are not an expert? Could you just say a bit more?
Thanks for your question. I've been studying as an investigative journalist cross-border issues related to transnational crime for over 10 years now. My career started in exposing what is now called by the Vancouver model of transnational money laundering.
Sorry, Mr. Cooper, that answer unfortunately comes at the end of the 5 minutes, so another 10 seconds, and then we'll need to switch to another MP.
Sure. My work as a journalist has been adopted by international academics. The typologies I exposed have now been reported on by the U.S. Treasury, and I have shared my information with the Pentagon. So that shows you my level of expertise.
Thank you. MP Lloyd and then MP Essasi. Ah, pardon.
No, sorry. I forgot MP de Bellefeuille. To you, madam. All right. Thank you. 2.5 minutes. My question is addressed to Dr. Nohara. If I've understood you correctly, in 2017, and I've been an MP representing my riding from 2006 through 2011, and then from 2019 through today. So the feeling that we've been abandoned, that the border around Lac Saint-François, the seaway, the feeling that we've been abandoned by the government, which is not making persistent or sufficient effort to catch contraband actors and arms trafficking and so on. You're telling me this is not just a gut feeling, it's actually technology that was withdrawn in 2017. Could you tell us quickly, the RCMP pilot project, which it seems was a success but wasn't carried forward for lack of ongoing budget, how much does that cost, the pilot project technology? Do you remember how much it cost? And is it like something extremely expensive, unreasonable, given how much it provides for and its benefits?
It's not expensive at all. It is. So I think if you Google BITEP, you'll probably find an Ottawa Citizen article. The original budget, I believe they proposed was $92 million. For comparison, the Gordie Howe Bridge, if you look generically, might be $6 billion. So at the time, for that whole stretch, a good part of Lake Ontario on the entire area of concern on the St. Lawrence you're speaking to, it was deemed to be $92 million cost. As I said, to do the entire Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system and provide that surveillance capability is somewhere between 10 to 20% of the Gordie Howe Bridge. The key piece, and maybe something I can share with you, are the members, the RCMP members themselves. Whether you have lots of members, we know we're short-staffed. We know that today everywhere. We know it'll take years to hire new members. The law enforcement is facing that everywhere. The surveillance-based decision support is a major force multiplier. It's a major force multiplier. So when you have limited staffing, you can't be everywhere. So that your eyes are provided by that persistent radar.
Sorry, Dr. Nohara, it's my fault. I should have informed everyone that this segment was for 2.5 minutes, and that's already over. But hopefully we'll have more time for Madame de Bellefeuille, which leads us to turn to MP Lloyd and then MP Essasi for 5 minutes each.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions here, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Cooper. I have a number of questions for you, so I'll try to be brief, and if you could take about 30 seconds, please, so that I can turn it over to MP Lloyd. Now, you talked, Mr. Cooper, about the compromise of security and political apparatuses. How does that leave us, in about 30 seconds, where does that leave us with our Five Eyes partners?
The case of Cameron Ortis is the known concrete example that has driven a deep wall between our partnership with the United States government, first and foremost. With allies, this loss of confidence in the ability for the U.S. government to share very sensitive intelligence with the Canadian government, and vice versa, the Canadian government or RCMP citing Stinchcombe laws for not sharing intelligence or ongoing information, such as the Falcon Lab probe, back to the U.S. This has left us in a near rupture with Washington, and I believe relates to the tariffs we're experiencing now.
Wow, a near rupture. That's fairly strong language. Beyond the Cameron Ortis case, is there high-level corruption at the RCMP, to your knowledge?
I need to answer because of the gravity of the question related to the Ortis case. And again, in open testimony, which was much of it closed for national security reasons, he pointed to compromises that he was aware of when he came into the force and started rising. And he pointed to other suspected high-level corruption suspects. And I believe the gravity of that trial, we don't yet fully understand.
If he is pointing to other suspects and nothing has come of that, then I think we have our answer. Last thing, when it comes to this high level of corruption, does that reach our political ministerial levels? As in, obviously we have ministers responsible for these things. Does that reach into that political apparatus, or at the very least, is there willful blindness from our current ministers on this?
Thanks for your question. Again, I answer due to the gravity very carefully. I've been informed by multiple credible sources, some of them on the record, such as Dr. David Asher, former senior Trump administration State Department investigator, that the DEA and State Department long had concerns that there were high-level corruption problems in Canada that had blocked investigations into Hezbollah. Other sources that I can't name said they have the fear that at the ministerial level or high in the bureaucracy, some sensitive investigations involving foreign threat networks can be blocked.
Okay, so I'm just going to be very clear here. Our Five Eyes partners, particularly the United States, are worried that at the ministerial level or at high bureaucratic levels, there are blocks to investigations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd?
In the time that I have left, can you summarize how a non-resident import system is being used to bring precursor drugs into Canada?
Yes, I've written stories for the Bureau from an intelligence source that can't be named in this case that pointed to data that our non-resident import system involves the transshipment of goods from China that are able to be shipped to other, just call them third-party locations, and then these shipments can be received in Canada by non-residents, non-Canadian citizens who use moving sort of addresses, warehouses to receive precursors. And then this, we can say, I'm told, is a major lack of visibility for the CBSA. They only have visibility to a level where China, I've termed it, think of it like an encryption technology app. China can essentially be invisible, moving fentanyl precursors into Canada that can be received by non-Canadians.
So transnational gangs are using basically a federal program to move precursor chemicals into Canada, the non-resident import system, and these precursor chemicals are being manufactured in Canada and then shipped out to places like New Zealand. I noticed, we talk about fentanyl a lot, but you were talking about methamphetamines. Can you tell us how, is Canada now like a massive exporter of methamphetamines to countries like New Zealand? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I've reported deeply on Vancouver, especially being a transnational, not only fentanyl transshipment and production hub, but methamphetamine, ecstasy. And this has been going on since the early 2000s in Vancouver for precisely the reasons I've testified about today.
10 more seconds, Mr. Cooper.
The situation is that, look at the Falkland Lab, what was found there, methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, marijuana. This is a drug crisis in Vancouver.
Thank you. We have time for the last intervention, Ms. MP Assassi, and then we'll turn to the second round of witnesses. Mr. MP Assassi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you also to the two witnesses. As you know, there's very little time left, so I'll keep this very brief. I'd have to comment, Mr. Cooper, that I found it somewhat confusing that you were blaming the Charter for some of the impediments that, according to you, have occurred in cooperation between U.S. and American officials. As you know, the Charter is now over 40 years old, but you were suggesting yourself that it's only been in the last 10 years. That having been said, as you know, you were interrupted because of the challenges with interpreters. I believe you were about to cite two court decisions that, in your opinion, have had an impact on cooperation between U.S. and Canadian officials. I was wondering if you could share the name of those two court cases and perhaps share with us what your misgivings are.
Thanks for your question, member. And with humility, I'm not a lawyer, but I've spoken to many lawyers and especially many current and former Canadian police about this opinion. It's not my opinion. It's my shared opinion that Stinchcombe, a law that essentially demands that the RCMP release a great or almost all evidence to the defense side, and Jordan, which at the same time applies a strict time pressure to very complex cases involving international networks and translation. Any amount of information has to be funneled through a time barrier with a tremendous volume due to Stinchcomb. So you can, and we can read cases that have dropped involving Mexican cartels. I'd point to Cobra in Alberta and Brisa in Ontario. We can find in the open source reporting, Stinchcomb and Jordan are cited in the dropping of those cases.
Thank you very much. Now, if I could... Thank you. Oh, sorry. Mr. Nohara, just given that this is the concluding question, I was wondering if there's anything else that you wanted to share with the committee in the time that remains, that you were unable to do so given the questions we asked.
Thank you for that. I would just simply say that there's a tremendous opportunity in front of us right now because we've already done the major work with our U.S. partners in border security to immediately bring capability to the border in the course of a week, especially in the St. Lawrence River area and in some other key hotspot areas. And then there's equally an opportunity in the climate that we're facing, the cross-border climate that we're facing with the United States to better serve that binational relationship as we have in the past by expansion across the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system, which I believe firsthand will be very, very well received and may have positive even tariff and other benefits for Canadians.
Thank you, MPSSE. Well, dear witnesses, we are very grateful for the time, for your availability, for your efforts prior to coming to this session. Thank you so much for having been helpful, having answered the questions and the comments of our members of Parliament, and we wish you a good day. For the others, we'll suspend for other witnesses to come in. Thank you. Tout le monde, nous avons maintenant la chance de commencer la deuxième partie de notre rencontre de ce matin ou de ce midi. Nous avons avec nous deux témoins auxquels nous aimerions souhaiter la bienvenue en partant, deux témoins importants, en commençant par M. Mark Weber, qui est président national du syndicat des douanes et d'immigration, et de la docteure Laura Dawson, qui est directrice générale de Future Borders Coalition. Vous êtes les bienvenus, M. Weber, Mme Dawson. Vous avez tous les deux 5 minutes pour votre présentation. Et on va commencer par M. Weber. No translation? Okay.
We will begin with testing. I'm Mushta.
The opportunity to appear as a witness as part of your study on the management of the Canada-U.S. border. The Customs and Immigration Union, which represents CBSA personnel, such as frontline border officers, has long highlighted critical insufficiencies affecting Canada's border services, the majority of which can be linked to issues of mismanagement. As National President of the Customs and Immigration Union, I am glad to be here once again to assist you in your important study. Due to the events unfolding south of us, this past year has brought our shared border with the United States into sharp focus, and I would like to start by commending the current government for its willingness to tackle border issues head-on. We were particularly pleased to see the Liberal leadership commit to hiring an additional 1,000 border officers, which, while short of the 2,000 to 3,000 that we estimate our borders ultimately need, will nevertheless be a strong start toward reinforcing our border infrastructure. I personally look very much forward to the fulfillment of this commitment. With that said, the day-to-day reality at CBSA remains bleak. Training facilities are lacking to truly ramp up the hiring of fully trained border officers. The number of students working in frontline roles at airports has more than doubled in the last 15 years. CBSA persists in staffing workplaces with managers, while frontline officers still have to contend with toxic local management. The agency continues to score at the very bottom of the Federal Public Service Employee Satisfaction Survey, and upper management remains wholly disconnected from daily frontline operations. The disconnect from upper management is perhaps what is most frustrating to our members. CBSA appears content to be in the back seat when it comes to frontline border law enforcement operations. This was most apparent with the launch of the federal government's border security plan at the beginning of this year, which could have been an opportunity for the government to revisit and expand the role of frontline border officers by allowing them to assist the RCMP in patrolling between ports of entry. Rather, the feeling amongst border officers is that they were essentially told to sit tight while everybody else, not only RCMP officers, but provincial police forces without even the proper legislative authority to enforce federal legislation, were called in to help. Indeed, it has become very apparent that there is a complete lack of trust on the part of the front line towards CBSA's upper echelons. The general feeling is that those who are in a position to direct the agency do not have the best interest of the front line at heart. This sentiment is not only reinforced by CBSA's recent decision to perform a blanket review of accommodation agreements across the country, which appears to be designed to push out seasoned officers who, while they cannot carry firearms, bring valuable law enforcement experience. The message from our employer is clear: we do not care about you and will show you the door should you be injured. At the end of the day, it seems like the Canada Border Services Agency has chosen to focus entirely too much on the services part of its name at the expense of what should be its primary mission, ensuring the security of our border and protecting Canadian communities. Too often does this agency choose to invest in automated technology designed to replace, not help, the officers who play an instrumental role in interdicting dangerous goods and criminals. I've said it before and will say it again: no one will ever self-declare that they are bringing in illicit goods or that they are breaking the law. Human interaction is always paramount. What's worse, when this technology designed to facilitate fails, as it did just a few days ago at airports and land borders across the country, it causes delays that could be avoided with adequate staffing, hampering the very service aspect the agency seeks to pursue. Ultimately, a strong, properly managed border requires bold decisions. By promising to hire 1,000 additional officers, the government has signaled that it is ready to make such decisions, but more is needed. Canada must invest in the people who protect our front line. We need to allow our frontline border officers to fulfill their legal mandate. We need to invest in CBSA training infrastructure to ensure that we can continue to meet future challenges head-on, both at and away from the front line. And we need a border services agency that is equipped to properly manage itself so it can better manage our border. I thank you and look forward to your questions.
Merci, Monsieur Weber. Madame Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Over to you, Dr. Dawson.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My organization, the Future Borders Coalition, was established in 2018 as the Beyond Preclearance Coalition. We are a nonprofit organization jointly registered in Canada and the United States. I'm a Canadian living in the United States, and we're funded entirely by member contributions. Our membership draws heavily from Canada, including airports, ports, motor coach and maritime shipping operators, customs brokers, bridges and tunnels, freight forwarders, travel industry, digital service providers, and businesses whose livelihoods depend on cross-border trade and travel, from forest products to financial services. We were established to provide a ready source of expertise and stakeholder input on government border, trade, and travel proposals. We maintain close working relationships with Canadian and American entities, including the Canadian Border Services Agency, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Department of Homeland Security, Public Safety Canada, Global Affairs Canada, State Department, and others. Put simply, we are a venue for problem solving and for those whose livelihoods depend on the safe and efficient functioning of our shared border. We've contributed positively to such issues as the COVID-19 border management, nexus enrollment, and revisions to the Safe Third Country Agreement. Our current activities include collaboration to resolve tariff disputes, modernization and expansion of border preclearance sites in the air, land, and marine modes, preparation for the CUSMA review, preparation for World Cup 2026, and support for new mechanisms of border security and cooperation. Yesterday, we hosted a meeting in Ottawa with more than 100 business, government, and think tank representatives. Your former witness, Sam Cooper, was a key speaker, to discuss the proliferation of cartels and organized crime across the Canada-US border. These are very complex issues, but let me summarize them in broad strokes. Organized crime does not operate in silos. It is orchestrated by far-reaching networks using world-class technology. These groups are indifferent to what they're trafficking: guns, drugs, cigarettes, human beings. The key element is their cross-border commodity is cash and generating profit. Unfortunately, we're attempting to address these threats piecemeal. One initiative focuses on guns, another initiative focuses on fentanyl. One's a provincial initiative, one's a cross-border initiative, another provincial. Many of our laws and regulations protect bad actors while tying the hands of the law enforcement and border officials we charge to protect us. Many of our border security weaknesses stem not from a lack of intelligence, but from a lack of ability to share that intelligence with one another. For these reasons, we strongly support the passage of Bill C-2. It unties the hands of law enforcement, enables more robust information sharing between officials across borders and with state, provincial, local, and First Nations policing communities. However, we also note that many of the costs of Bill C-2 will be offloaded to airports, ports, railways, bridges, and tunnels. These entities are not equipped to take on new financial obligations, especially in a time of economic downturn. So we would see these commitments unevenly applied and not based on risk, but based on who could afford to implement them. We recommend looking at a U.S. model which relies on centralized funding and allows priority elements to be rolled out systematically. Our other recommendations focus on technology. We want to provide our border and security officials with the technology they need to do their jobs effectively. This does not mean replacing human beings, but rather giving human beings the decision support tools they need so that by the time a shipment or a person arrives at the border, that official has all the advanced information they need to make a good determination of risk. Is this green light? Is this red light? Is this yellow light? The bad guys have this technology. We should equip the good guys as well. Some of the tools that we recommend, and we've written a report on this that I'll provide the link to, include AI and ML applications for pattern detection and social network analysis, blockchain to detect document fraud, and non-intrusive imaging technology to scan high-risk cargo quickly and at scale. Security is good for business. Border security and border efficiency are not mutually exclusive. Secure and efficient borders are good for all of us. This is evident by the excellent results we've had for more than 50 years of aviation pre-clearance. However, it is essential that these costs are not offloaded to business and that public entities that are already stretched thin in the face of an economic downturn. We are at a watershed moment in Canada-US relations. We can either disengage with the U.S. at points of disagreement, or we can seize this as an opportunity for constructive engagement. We can launch new initiatives that are equal to the threats we face and leave behind practices and procedures that no longer serve us. Thank you.
That is very timely. Thank you so much, which enables us to turn to questions and comments on the part of members of Parliament. And we'll first turn to MP Kirkland and then MP Ramsey for 6 minutes each.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both being here. Ms. Dawson and Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, I'll start with you. Considering you started your testimony with commending the current government on a promise, and the promise was 1,000 border agents, and you said that was a strong start. Given that, what would your vision be then for how soon that obligation could be fulfilled?
Thank you for the question. Right now, I do not believe it can really be fulfilled. We have one training center that can train under 600 new officers per year, which is about what our attrition is per year. So there's no way you get 1,000 additional from that. My understanding is that there's a $20 million proposal with the CBSA to expand the training facility in Chilliwack. My understanding is also that that is on hold. It has not been approved. I've heard talks of expansions at Rigaud. I know there's ideas of spots that were available in Windsor as well, but so far we're just stuck with that one training center. So I don't know how we're going to get our numbers up right now.
Okay, thank you. So you're not sure how we're going to get the numbers up. Neither are we. In previous testimony, we've seen that really the plan hasn't really even started yet as to how that's going to happen. There's been a lot of talk. Would you say that, given that, the process of creating a plan to hire those 1,000 agents, is it fair to say that it's a bit of a pie-in-the-sky promise?
Pie in the sky would be an expression that could be used. I think it might be a little bit more long than short term in terms of achievability. I think the CBSA is looking at perhaps not hiring 1,000 additional full border services officers, but hiring lesser positions, downloading duties onto newly created FB1 positions that they are deeming administrative, we are very concerned actually do the work of a border services officer. We have the CBSA now is undergoing a review of accommodated officers who cannot be armed, where they're essentially telling them that you are going to self-demote or we're going to show you the door. These are in many instances people who've injured themselves on the job. That's how our employer is treating them right now. It's deplorable, but it looks really like just a cost-saving measure. So we're really concerned when we hear 1,000. We want to make sure that that's 1,000 actual border services officers.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That is a concern that I have as well, definitely. You've said previously, I believe it was a Global News interview, that we search less than 1% of what comes into Canada, and you mentioned that last year. Is that still true today? Has anything changed in the last year?
No, nothing's changed. Again, we are not dinosaurs. We realize that technology can be helpful. What we're seeing at the CBSA is technology replacing us. We really don't search much. We don't speak to almost anyone at all anymore coming through airports. We see similar plans for land borders. It's extremely concerning. We're depending on someone to self-declare to a machine in large part.
Okay, thank you. So just back one question for the 1,000 border agents. Would these resources then, you mentioned it already, they're better on the front line. That's where we need them.
It's absolutely the one place where we need them, yes.
Okay. Quick question to Ms. Dawson, and then I may come back to Mr. Weber depending on my time. You said the integrity of our border is the foundation of our economic relationship with the United States. Do you believe that the current government under both the previous Prime Minister and the current one, has upheld that integrity?
I believe that we respond to crisis. There are limited resources and many things to do with those resources, and so we haven't faced the kind of border crisis and the kind of relationship crisis that we are facing now. So I'm encouraged by the actions of the current government, and I would like to see them meet their commitments and also ensure continuing engagement and interoperability with the United States, because this is a shared challenge.
Okay, thank you. I think I have a little bit more time, so how much time do I have left? Oh, perfect. Mr. Weber, I'll come back to you. Sorry, you mentioned that, rail. I believe you mentioned in that same interview that rail, we don't do it all. Is that still the case? So it's still the case that rail, we don't do it all. So in my community of Oshawa, we have 2 rail lines that come right through CN and CPKC. We need to be able to do that. So would you say criminals know where our blind spot is then?
It would be very naive to think they don't.
So it would be fair to say they absolutely know that rail is our blind spot and they are using that now and we're doing nothing about it.
I've never asked one, but I would be shocked if they do not.
Okay, thank you. That's fair. All right, I think I have a couple more seconds. Sorry, I could keep bouncing back and forth. Ms. Dawson, you did also call for the strengthening of Bill C-2. I believe you've mentioned the strengthening of Bill C-2. Can you recall or possibly give us some weaknesses that you see the current legislation and how that could change?
Sure.
For the better?
The most important part, from my perspective, of that bill is the ability to share information across jurisdictions effectively and well. The challenge, of course, is who pays for it. And offloading those expenses to the operators, to the private sector, I think that is the biggest challenge that I'm hearing from my members. I think I'll leave it there.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la députée Kirkland.
Thank you very much, MP Kirkland. We will hear from MP Ramsey and then MP de Bellefeuille, 6 minutes each.
Mr. Weber, good morning. You've, although I would be inclined to agree with you that we need an agent at the front line. There's also an implication here I find a bit challenging that technology implies better detection, implies more work for our agent, and maybe work that is better attributed. What would you say about this comment?
Difficult. Again, technology is absolutely useful as long as the technology is there to assist the officer doing the work. When you get to the point where the technology is just replacing the officer, where you're relying on people to self-declare to the technology, you're not going to find anything. You gather intelligence through interviews, you gather intelligence through searches. We're not doing that anymore. We're relying on people to come in and self-declare. So it's the help of the technology aspect that's missing. It shouldn't be replacing the human element. No machine is going to detain someone, arrest someone, really find anything. You need the person there to do that.
Is it realistic to think that we can filter everybody that comes at an airport with an individual questionnaire? And should we not rely instead of information ahead and that allow better intelligence that allows to detect us criminal activity?
Yeah, so the information that's provided ahead is exactly the declaration form that was completed when you landed previously at an airport. Previously, every person would present that declaration form to an officer who would look it over, ask 1 or 2 questions for the most part, and on you went, or you went for a search. Now everyone self-declares to a machine. The machine spits out a card. Of course, no one is ever going to self-declare that they're bringing in something that they shouldn't, and out the door you go. We're supposed to have things such as roving teams who randomly will interview people, do random searches and such. That has almost disappeared. We don't have the staff to do that. So for the most part, we're relying on people to self-declare, which is just never going to happen.
How much time is it needed to train an agent to be efficient and
Trained and efficient are 2 different things. The training program is 18 weeks. The apprenticeship is 1 year. To be really any good at what you're doing, I'd say 4 or 5 years.
And how would you say how could CBSA do to you elaborate on the lack of confidence that with the CBSA? What do we need to do to build that confidence back into a CBSA agent?
I think you need to start properly staffing with the officers who do the work. Right now, we are absolutely drowning in middle management. We have ports of entry who have more managers than officers. Managers don't process travelers. That's extremely common at the CBSA. The other thing is that we're not an organization who promote from within. You look at other law enforcement agencies, the people in positions to make decisions have all come from the line. They've worked as officers, they know the workplaces, they know the job. CBSA is unique in that they do not do that. We parachute people in from outside. So the people who are in a position to decide how the border is going to operate have never worked at a border. So in terms of confidence from our membership, from the officers as to how the border is operating is close to zero. You often have to explain to upper management how borders work as though you're explaining it to someone who's never traveled in an airport, who doesn't know how a land border works. It is, you know, I'm trying to use my words carefully. It is, it's really shocking at times, and these are the people who are deciding how our border works.
Madame Dawson, Monsieur Nohara.
Ms. Dawson, Dr. Dawson, Dr. Nohara told us a lot about detecting what goes across the borders, but we all know that information and intelligence is really the key, the essential key for efficient, effective work at the borders. Could you tell us more about what's needed to improve intelligence?
I've done interviews with people in the National Detection Center in Canada and the National Detection Center in the United States, and the differences could not be greater. The tools available to the Canadians simply tie their hands. Mr. Weber will know better than I do, but there are something like 100 different laws and rules that have to be evaluated by a single border official at the moment that he or she makes contact. We want to stretch out that process so they get the information in advance. Rather than looking at things at a single moment in time, we want to do social network analysis to know more about the shipper and their previous dealings, not just what their container looks like at this moment. Who are their associates? Who are they associated with? We want to know what crossings has this person made before? Do they make frequent crossings? Where? Land, air. So we give the officers the tools they need, that long-range or upstream view, and we share that information with the United States where it's appropriate, and we have a robust picture of where things are going, and we can make risk assessment and identify this person goes in a green box. And if they do something that catches the attention of an individual officer that they should be meeting with, then they can be taken to secondary. But if you don't effectively screen for risk management, then everyone is high risk.
Merci beaucoup, Madame.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dawson. Thank you, MP Ramsey. We will now hear from MP de Belleville. You have 6 minutes, Madam. And then we'll hear from MP Lloyd. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A court question and quick responses, please. I haven't much time. Mr. Weber, first for you. You said that the Rigaud is the sole training school for CBSA officers, correct? Yes. And you said that the training lasts 18 weeks. So to reach the annual capacity is 672 students, I think, a year can be graduated from there. So the government's undertaking to graduate or to put in 1,000 new border agents, that means that you're short on 3 something. Right now, the government and the CBSA, do you have everything you need to train an extra 300 a year beyond those whom you already train? No. Okay, do you think that CBSA could try to respond to the government's request by training agents that wouldn't necessarily be trained at Rigaud and wouldn't carry arms, let's say, carry firearms, would be covering other tasks?
Different kinds of regional training, national arming later, arming first, depending on what mode you're being sent to. I've heard all of these ideas floated by the CBSA. We brought some forward ourselves. Right now, though, we're stuck at the old model of 18 full weeks.
Donc, ce que vous nous dites, c'est que pour arriver...
So what you're telling us is that to train 333 more agents a year beyond what can be trained, those who can be trained at Rigaud, you'll need innovation. But that each of them must have 18 weeks of training and be authorized to carry firearms. Okay. So border surveillance, do you think it calls for more frontline officers? Yes, it does. In your opinion, do you think that the lack of frontline officers on the borders is linked to the fact that right now you have insufficient resources, that people are putting in a lot of extra hours and are exhausted?
It's almost unlimited. Members are exhausted. I think in the staffing levels of frontline BSOs also has to do with where resources are allocated as well. As I've said, it's very common for ports of entry to have as much middle management as the officers actually doing the work, and that situation just gets worse and worse and worse.
Oui, on m'a même dit, j'ai eu une information.
Yes, I've been told that at the Port of Montreal, the lack of staffing of resources to open a container, and these are trained border officers, it can take up to 2 weeks to open a container. So that slows down trade. You have to wait for the officers to be available. So there's really a lack of staffing, lack of people able to actually work in the field. So my opinion is that we shouldn't have the 1,000 more just carrying out investigation and no one on the front line.
What we need, yes.
Comprenez-vous qu'avec le contexte
So given the geopolitical context, especially with the United States, our trade relationships as well, this being under stress at present, do you think that we should, at this point, make a minister directly responsible for securing the border and managing the border? Don't you think it would be time to ensure that we respond to the current geopolitical situation, given that CBSA's approach is no longer up to the job, and we might need a minister who would be directly in charge of border management rather than simply leaving everything to the agency, which hasn't as much reach? Don't you think that the time has come to change the governance structure itself?
Needed. It's difficult to say if that would be better, as we don't know what exactly that would look like either. Again, we need the resources. We need the agency's focus to be on security and not facilitation. We need a reduction in the number of managers. I think the other big thing, too, that, I get to speak about less here, too, though, is the absolutely toxic culture. We are not last in the public service employee survey, every single survey, accidentally. People would rather work in prisons than come to a CBSA workplace. That's a terrible sign. It's toxicity. It's an overabundance of managers, and we see policies being implemented like they're doing now, essentially telling every single person working there that you are a slip or fall away and we will show you the door. It's a horrendous way to treat people. I would almost say it's un-Canadian. It's unheard of anywhere else, and it's consistent with the CBSA.
Vous aviez parlé dans l'allocution d'une
You have spoken of flexible interventions from agents on the front line being able to step out of their offices and intercept people who are crossing illegally, to interdict them and then wait for RCMP officers to take over. And I can tell you, working in a rural area, the RCMP office isn't all that close to the border. So do you think it would be a good idea to increase the responsibilities?
Allow the RCMP to do day's work and doing that work between ports of entry. Right now, we've seen different combinations of provincial forces, parks involved, sheriffs. It seems like everyone is helping protect the border except the CBSA, who seem very happy to just sit back and let others fulfill what is actually their mandate. To intercept someone under IRPA or the Customs Act, it is only the CBSA and RCMP who even have that legal authority. So the system they have now is if one of these provincial authorities picks up someone between a port of entry, they bring them back to us anyway.
Merci, Monsieur. Oh, sorry. Merci, Monsieur Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. I will now turn to MP Lloyd and then MP Akan. You each have 5 minutes.
To the witnesses, I'll start with Mr. Weber. IRCC, Immigration Refugee Canada, confirmed at Immigration Committee that there are over 47,000 people here on expired student visas, so they're here illegally. Is that a high number historically in your experience?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that does not surprise me, no.
Does it not surprise you that you think it's a high number?
No, it doesn't surprise me that that is the number.
Yeah. Now, how many officers across the country are tasked from CBSA to investigate these 47,000 plus cases?
Yeah, that would be our inland officers. Top of my head, I'd say around 300 and change.
Whole country?
Pretty much, yeah.
And how many of those officers, like you've talked a lot about management and the overburden of that, how many of those 300 officers are actually there on the front lines doing that work?
That would be inland work. That's their job, to find people who are here illegally, deport them back to wherever they are going. We desperately need resources there as well.
But you'd say that 300 is the number of the people on the front line doing the work, or does that include managers as well?
No, I don't know if that would include managers. Again, I don't have the exact numbers. I'm going at the top of my head, adding up the numbers at the different offices, but could definitely get you exact numbers if you need.
So 300 CBSA officers have been tasked with investigating 47,000 cases, and this is just student visas we're talking about, not all the other cases where you would have to have an officer investigating somebody who's here on an expired visa or here illegally. Is 300 officers even close to the amount that you would need to get rid of this backlog?
To actually catch up and do it, no. Of course, some people will appear on themselves and agree to leave. You don't always have to actually escort them back to their country of origin. It's an endless fire hose of work. It's a good way to describe it.
Now, would you say it's taking up a lot of the resources of CBSA or is it not a priority to look for these 47,000?
No, it is. Again, it's a matter of resources. There's only so many people to do all of that work.
Thank you. Now, we've heard that there have been an increasing number of positive matches on the U.S. terrorism watch list from people who are trying to cross the border from Canada into the United States. I believe there was about 200, between April and September of this year, there was about 284 positive identifications of people on the U.S. terrorism watch list trying to cross into the United States from Canada. Is the CBSA aware that these people are in Canada? Are they aware that they're on a terrorism watch list, or are they only being apprehended because they try to cross in the United States?
Depend on the individual case. I would think they are aware of most, yes.
Okay. And Dr. Lawson, sorry, Dr. Dawson, sorry. It was put in here, Laura Dawson. What sort of information, existing agreements, we talked about this terrorism case, is that information being shared with the U.S. to Canada about these? I mean, there is some public information, but is there good information sharing between the United States and Canada on these terrorism watch list suspects going across the border?
We had really good testimony from Sam Cooper about some of the things, the hurdles that prevent effective information sharing. And so a lot of the officers on both sides, they revert to informal phone call. I know a person at the desk on the other side. And so in the absence of really effective mechanisms for formal communication or institutions for formal communication. I mean, our cross-border crime forum can only do so much. We've really lost a lot of the capacity to just get together and talk about things. So in the absence of formal institutions, we're relying on informal relationships. And if somebody retires, I've heard from a number of officials, that means they lose whole swaths of intelligence about specific sectors or domains.
What you're saying, Dr. Dawson, is that there is no formal structure for this information sharing currently. We're depending on, people who might be retiring soon and their standard operating procedures possibly being lost when they retire to protect the system.
I'm saying between the legal blockages on information sharing and the lack of formal mechanisms for information sharing, yes, we rely too much on informal conversations.
And my final question, the 300 officers you cited, Mr. Weber, over the past 10 years, has that 300 number increased or decreased?
I'd say it's remained pretty much steady. Yeah.
So there's been no significant or no increase from the 300
really,
officers?
No.
But would you say it'd be fair to say that the workload of these 300 officers has increased significantly in the past 10 years?
Correct, yes.
So we have the same amount of officers, the same amount of resources, but we have a massive new workload for them to do. And would you say that's probably contributing to the lack of morale at CBSA?
It absolutely does contribute, and not only when you're dealing with removals, but when you're talking about officers working on the front line at our land borders, airports, it's pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
Thank you, MP Lloyd. Let's turn to MP Akan, et ensuite la députée de Bellefeuille. MP Akan for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank Mr. Weber and Dr. Dawson for being with us today. So I would like to ask questions to Dr. Dawson. As we know, Canada and the United States share a long-lasting commitment to securing our shared border. With the Government of Canada introducing Bill C-2, the Strong Borders Act, to enhance border security and deepen collaboration with international partners in combating organized crime, could you please speak to how Canadian and U.S. officials might further advance joint border security operations, and considering the current political climate, what practical steps can be taken to ensure that cooperation remains effective and resilient?
Thank you. The CBSA and CBP collaboration are just the first step. There are so many lines of collaboration with provincial police, state police, law enforcement. We had a meeting yesterday that included tribal representatives from the Mohawk Nations, the chiefs of police there. And unless we are communicating effectively among all these jurisdictions, we don't have strong communication and collaboration. Generally speaking, U.S. and Canadian officials get along very well. They really put their best efforts into what they can do under the circumstances. But in the absence of leadership and in the absence of opportunities to collaborate further, they struggle. We have bilateral border enforcement security teams. They work very well. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but can we expand them and fund them appropriately?
Thank you very much. So how could streamlined bilateral cooperation in border security mutually benefit the U.S. and Canada in sectors outside of law enforcement and intelligence, like trade or tourism?
Yeah. Business, whether in travel or trade, no one wants to have their rights and privileges to an efficient border appropriated by bad actors. And so if we have better and thoughtful border security, then our cargo and our people can move better. When things like low-value shipments, which was intended to help small business in e-commerce, taken over by fentanyl dealers and small packages, that's not good for anyone.
So following my question, you pretty much touch the areas. What are important dimensions of the U.S.-Canada bilateral border security relationship that are often neglected or misunderstood? How can these elements strengthen efforts to counter our headline issues like fentanyl?
I think the first thing that's misunderstood is people think we are much farther apart, that there is a U.S. Bully that is telling us exactly what to do, when in fact Canadians and Americans collaborate very, very well on many, many issues, pre-clearance, nexus, etc. That would be one of the main things, but also responding to the political climate right now with the desire to just roll up the rug and not work with the United States. The crisis is stronger than ever because of the global migration and criminality challenge, but also as the U.S. becomes more engaged on the southern border, we have more encounters on the northern border. And if we're not looking after that, then we're simply shifting a southern border problem to Canada where we're not equipped to deal with it, and it's going to hurt our communities.
Thank you very much. And my last questions will be, are there any lessons to be learned from other areas of U.S.-Canadian bilateral cooperation for border security and management, like our military partnership?
Our military partnership is excellent. I think the NORAD relationship in particular is the envy of the world. And there we see areas of joint command, joint interoperability, collaboration, and communication. And I think that's a model that we can undertake very well, period.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Do I still have time? If there's anything left, I would like to share it with Madame de Bellefeuille, as she has 2.5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Effectivement, nous sommes à Madame de Bellefeuille.
Yes, indeed. Over to MP de Bellefeuille. Usually 2.5 minutes, Madam, but you have an extra 30 seconds, 3 minutes. Thank you so much, Ms. Akan. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to take the time that I still have because the chair, Mr. Caputo, and I received an email from a prior officer of CBSA who spoke of the toxic work climate, so toxic that she said that officers really have to set aside their own integrity to change some documents, some investigation reports, to fall in with management. And this has been shared with some of the members here. It's very concerning, very disturbing. Could you tell me whether this is generalized? Is this an isolated case?
Is pretty common across all work. I've talked a little bit here about some of the reasons. It's very heavy-handed management. Everything is dealt with discipline. It's not a management style where you speak to your employees. Everything is done through a formal fact-finding, suspensions, disciplines, firings. The ability to speak to an employee has been absolutely lost at this agency. It's a culture that's hard to change. I think it has a lot to do with the overabundance of management as well. It makes our members feel disheartened in that all we really want to do is be able to do our job. It seems that management is there to tell us repeatedly that, no, you got into this to keep Canadian communities safe, but no, you can't do what you want to be doing. Right?
Monsieur le Président, on parle dans le témoignage.
Mr. Chair, in what this person who wrote said was that, her very integrity was at issue, that an officer would carry out an investigation, and if the result didn't please the manager, they felt they had to change their reporting. Is this an isolated case?
I know the specific case, but I'm not.
Très bien. C'est assez préoccupant, cette situation, Monsieur Weber.
Of considerable concern, Mr. Weber. So my last question, quickly then, we've had a few discussions with CBSA about having more resources at the Port of Montreal, more staffing. And what I've been told is that no, not at all. There are no more officers on the front line to help open containers, let's say, at the Port of Montreal. So is this the case?
Nor has there been any increase in the space. One of the difficulties we have now is that there's only really room to park a small number of cars to actually do the searches. Once you've found X amount of stolen cars, we have to wait for someone to come tow them, sometimes days or weeks before we can even continue opening to find more. So there again, it's a matter of resources, right?
C'est une question de ressources et d'infrastructures.
All right, a matter of resources and infrastructure, I imagine. CBSA doesn't have what it needs to carry out its work appropriately, find what's in the containers.
We have marine units with no boat. It's pretty desperate in a lot of cases, and again, that adds to the low morale, right?
Que pensez-vous de la décision de...
Madame de Bellefeuille, désolé.
Ms. Bellefeuille, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but unfortunately, we must turn to MP Au for 5 minutes and then MP Dondurant for the last 5 minutes.
It would be your turn, MP Au.
Yes. My question is, now we talk about the emphasis on the middle management versus the people on the ground. So can you elaborate further on that?
The people who do the actual interaction with travelers are a border services officer. Above that, you have superintendents. Above that, you have chiefs. Above that, you have directors. We work in workplaces where we're often outnumbered by managers. I've acted as a manager. I'll be candid here. I've never been that bored in my life. I mean, you know, to say that they have 5 minutes of work to do in a day would be a tremendous exaggeration. I'm talking about numbers where you have more people watching me work than the people doing the work. Imagine doing that and going into that every day and fill in one of those public service employee surveys and see what kind of score you get. It is abhorrent what we see happening.
Now, I always have a question in mind. Now, when the two of you talk about the problems, like, you know, the lack of resources, you know, lack of manpower, lack of this and that. These are not new issues. We have heard about that time and time again. So what are the obstacles for us to make real progress? So where did the buck stop?
What you need is people who do the work. What you have is an organization that is lack of a better way of putting it, just drowning in managers who don't do the work. They don't interact with travelers. They're not doing the searches. They're not looking in containers. They're not looking for people who are in Canada who shouldn't be to deport them. I don't know what they do. I've tried it, and I could tell you that it's not much. And the numbers that they have, we really can't figure it out, or why some of those resources in middle management are not taken and turned into officers who can actually do that work. It's very frustrating.
But what kind of changes has to happen, you know, in terms of legislation or, you know, redistribution of authority?
Legislation, again, simply allowing us to fulfill our mandate to work between ports of entry. Right now, that's one of the big ones that would be easy to achieve. Right now, if I'm working at a port of entry and I see someone right beside the port cross over the border illegally, I have to phone someone. It's my legal mandate as a CBSA officer to interdict that, but I'm not allowed to do that. I have to phone the RCMP, who might tell me I'll be there in 4 to 6 hours. Sometimes they say that we can't come at all. That's shameful, and that can easily be rectified today if the CBSA is just told, yeah, you're going to be allowed to do that now. We have 117 ports of entry across the border between Canada and the United States, many of them in the exact kind of rural areas where people do those illegal crossings. People aren't illegally crossing in Toronto. It's mostly in those remote places where they're doing it. We are resources that are already there begging to be allowed to assist the RCMP to do this work and being told, no, you cannot do it.
So again, you said that this can happen today. So why is it not happening?
The CBSA seems to have no interest in doing that work. They've been very happy to sit back and let different combinations of provincial agencies and parks. We have almost everyone above a Boy Scout troop now working between the borders, finding people crossing illegally, but the CBSA, whose legal mandate it is to do it, will not do it.
So, Dr. Lawson, do you have anything to comment on the questions that I raised?
There are no quick fixes or easy fixes, but I've got something to offer. The vast majority of crossings, whether it's a cargo or a person, are risk-free, with integrity, and people who just want to do business or want to travel from place to place. We need to make better use of our Trusted Trader and Trusted Traveler program so that we provide incentives for people who comply and provide advance information so we know who they are, we know who their associates are. Right now we're looking at the thing as it crosses the border, and I've heard from CBSA officers, if you have a very good forged document, your cargo will probably go through. If there's no other way to determine the risk of that particular shipment. So let's look at incentivizing good behavior and compliance on the part of travelers and traders.
Okay, good. Now, and I have another question about the rail system. You mentioned that this is the weak point of having illegal things coming through the border. Again, this is not a new issue. What has been taken to address that concern?
Understanding that there was a pilot project for us to work on the U.S. side, as they have the facilities at a couple of ports of entry to actually do those searches. To my knowledge, those have not gone forward. In Canada, we don't really have the facilities to do those searches.
So again, why not?
Were I someone who manages the CBSA, I could provide you that answer. We bring forward exactly what you're saying to me. I bring forward to CBSA management. Again, I'm bringing it forward to CBSA management, who for the most part have never worked at a border, which adds to the difficulty, but there seems to be very little interest there in doing that work.
Thank you, MP. Alors, nous allons maintenant nous tourner vers la députée d'Endurant pour 5 minutes.
MP d'Endurant, 5 minutes.
Merci de nous
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us. This is very interesting. It's very helpful to us. Dr. Dawson, you briefly touched on a topic that I found of the highest interest, being transferring the Mexican issues now that the Americans are dealing more with their border with Mexico, so the sort of transfer, displacement of that activity from the southwest border up to the U.S. northern border that we share, that is shared with Canada. So could you tell us what we're seeing more of that we didn't have in the past, and what we should learn from what the United States has done on its southwest border to ensure that we don't see that sort of problem up here?
Seeing an increase in the humanitarian, people seeking better lives in North America, and when the border in the U.S. becomes closed, then they move to the north. Interestingly, the number of Central Americans and Mexicans crossing that border or moving to the north has gotten progressively smaller, and proportionately we're seeing a rise in folks from Africa, from Asia, from India, all over the world. So it has become less of a humanitarian issue and more of a let's try our luck in North America. And if it's hard to get into the United States, they will come to Canada. And then we see people who have more resources and wealth who are trying to skirt the rules, skirt the laws. So even though we felt, from a trade perspective that having a visa on Mexico didn't make sense, reimposing that visa was essential because it was being utilized by wealthy criminals who wanted to come to Canada and then hire a taxi, hire a bus, hire a boat to go into the United States. So we were and are a conduit for bad actors who, if they can't find a point of permeability through the United States, like water, they will flow to the weak point, and that becomes Canada.
En ce sens-là, est-ce que ces deux adresses...
That being the case, I think you're mentioning mostly refugee applicants. Was C2 appropriate for that?
C2 is appropriate as a risk assessment, risk management tool so that we can identify legitimate humanitarian applicants from those that would use the rights and privileges that we afford on a humanitarian basis to bad actors who are just trying to find a way in.
Merci. Je comprends que c'est peut-être pas votre...
Thank you. No, I understand this may not be your area of expertise, but Mr. Weber really drew us a clear picture of the situation, you know, the way the offices are working, how they're working, and whether they can work as they need to. So do you have any point of view about HR and whether there's anything to be improved there? What's your view of that to CBSA?
A lot of CBSA frontline officers in my research, but I also speak to management and leadership. And we have an organization which was essentially established as operations, and we're charging them with now big picture, now strategy. Now we have President Trump. How are you going to manage that? And so the system is not equipped to do all of the things that it needs to do. And when I speak to the frontline officers and analysts, they are so frustrated that they have taken initiative to do something and they can't take the ball down the field. They can't do the next thing. They have found a bad actor, and that person declares refugee status. Whoops, can't do anything about that. That person has moved to a different jurisdiction. Can't do anything about that either. So the men and women are very committed to their job, but they're just so frustrated that they can't do it as effectively as they know they can.
How can we improve it?
I think this committee is doing essential work now, but what I hear from my Americans is that Canadians have great intentions, but they just don't deliver. They take half measures, they take quarter measures. Let's use this crisis as an opportunity to make the reforms that are necessary and give people the tools they need.
Merci, Madame la députée.
Thank you, MP Dandurand, which brings this excellent one-hour session with two wonderful witnesses to an end. Thank you very much for your presentations, and thank you for having put a lot of effort and integrity into preparing for us.
Feeling, I think, the gratitude that many of us are feeling and have felt because of you coming to see us today. So thank you, and looking forward perhaps to see you again in the near future. Alors, merci. Pour les...
Thank you. And for the rest of us, for the MPs, very briefly here, we will be working to prepare the next meetings. MP de Bellefeuille, Mr. Caputo, and Mr. Ramsey, together with the good assistance of our clerk, we are working up Thursday's meeting. It's very likely that Minister Ananda Sangari will join us for that meeting. We need to find the right time for her and where. And we're also working on the meetings to follow that. After our meeting in the riding, 22nd and 23rd, we do have witnesses lined up, but we do need to work together, members, to program the sequence, what we need to do with Bill C-8, which has been sent to the committee and which has priority. So we're all online. Ms. de Bellefeuille, Mr. Caputo, Mr. Ramsey, clerk, and myself will carry out that work, and we will meet again on Thursday next. The meeting is adjourned.